Right behind me, I have two of BenQ professional 32-inch displays. They're both really great and large screens, but let's talk about both of them in this video. One of them that I have here is the SW321C. That is their professional photo and video workflow display, and the other one's the PD3220U. That is their professional design display. Both of these displays can show true accurate colors, but there are differences between these two. And what I'm going to do in this video is show you the difference and the similarities between the two of them to see which one fits better into your workflow. I'm ArtIsRight, BenQ Ambassador. Let's get started. Before we start, make sure you subscribe and hit on the notification bell so you'll be updated every time I upload a new video. So first of all, let's talk about the size. Both of these are classified as a 32-inch display. The SW321C is a 32-inch, a true 32-inch, while the PD3220U is 31.5-inch diagonally across. Another thing to note too is that both of these panels are 10-bit IPS panels. That means they have great viewing angle from side to side. So if you're working in an environment where people have to gather around the displays, both of these displays would be fantastic to do that kind of job in a studio or in a working environment. The resolution for both of these displays are very similar. In fact, they are the same. They're 4K UHD 3840 by 2160 resolution. They're LED backlit, so that means that pretty much once you turn them on, they're going to be ready to go right away. Now, something to keep in mind too is that if you are going to calibrate your display, I would leave it running for at least 15 to 20 minutes before you run the calibration, but otherwise you'll be good. Both of these displays also comes with a factory report. These are individual reports for each individual panels, and they talk about the different characteristics, color responses, and so forth. The PD line report is just one little tiny page like this. It covers pretty much the delta E, how the display has been calibrated, while the SW line, being a much more professional display with hardware calibration and everything, it's actually a two-page report with granular details about your panel. So those are just interesting things to note. They both come out of the box with all of the cables that you are going to need to hook up your computer system to your display, and that's another great thing that I really like about BenQ. And something to note too is that both of these displays are CalMan verified and Pantone validated. When comparing these two Pro line of BenQ display, one of the things we have to talk about is the industrial design. The PD3220U has a very sleek design, almost bezel-less. The stand and everything is super modern. I really love it. In fact, the PD line is designed to fit really well with the Apple products. For example, the MacBook Pro sitting here, and also the space gray keyboard and trackpad. It fits in really well. It looks really well. It looks like they belong together. The difference comes in with the SW line. The SW line is really designed more for pro videos, pro photography, and what they want to do in this one is, instead of creating a flashy design, they went with a little bit more of conservative design so that none of the elements in here reflect colors. None of the elements in here are flashy or as shiny or anything like that. They're all matte and they're all gray throughout, and this is to minimize any color reflection when you're doing color critical work. And that's really amazing. The other thing too with the SW line that we have to know is that it comes with a shading hood standard out of the box. The shading hood is really nice. It has felt lining on the inside. It minimizes all the stray light coming in. This is something that's different than the PD line, because in the PD line there is no shading hood and they don't make a shading hood for this. So that's just something to note, the difference between the two. The other thing about the exterior that's going to be different between these two displays are the USB ports on the side. On the PD line, what you get on the USB port is USB Type A, a USB Type C, and also a headphone jack. Where on the SW line, what you're going to get is two USB 3.1 Type A ports and also an SD card reader. So these are the different ports on the side, and they're really designed for different workflows. One of the things too that I want to mention is that the PD model also has two 2-watt speakers built into, where the SW line does not have those speakers built into it. So those are some of the features differences on the exterior, and I went into the interior a little bit there, but that gives us an idea of how these two Pro lines of displays are designed and targeted towards different group of creative professionals. The next thing that I want to go over here is the panel inside the display. So first of all, let's start out with the SW321C. What makes this panel really unique, or what makes this display really unique, is that it has a hardware 3D lookup table on the inside of the display. It is a 16-bit lookup table. And what that means is that when you use BenQ Palette Master Element software to do the calibration on this, all the adjustment is done at the panel level. That means your video card is outputting full signal, so there are no tonal compression whatsoever. This is where the difference comes in between the two. The PD3220U does not have a hardware calibration built in. You can still calibrate this using software calibration, so you can use a device from either X-Rite or Datacolor, and you can use their software to calibrate the display, or you can also use CalMan to do display calibration on this display too. So there's different ways of calibrating this. The difference is that when you calibrate this PD3220U, it's going to generate an ICC profile. That ICC profile that's generated is going to change or compress and expand some of the tones of the video card output in order for the color to match the specification or the standard color range that you want. In this case, most of the time, we're going to be calibrating to Display P3. So it's going to manipulate some of the colors to make sure that they are adjusted within that range, and all of the adjustment is done from the video card output rather than at the panel level. But speaking of the panel, let's go over one more thing. Let's talk about the color space, the color gamut that these panels can see. The PD3220U here can show 100% sRGB and 95% DCI-P3. This is what BenQ guarantees. From my testing and calibration testing, I found out that when I try to calibrate this in Adobe RGB mode, I'm able to get about 88% Adobe RGB. So the panel color gamut in this case is not quite as wide as the SW321C, because the SW321C here can show 100% sRGB, and it can also show 99% Adobe RGB. The thing is that when I've done a calibration with this display using Palette Master Element and Panel Native setting, I'm able to get a color space that's about 103 to 105% Adobe RGB. So I can calibrate it and get a color space that's even larger than Adobe RGB, and that's actually really fantastic for photo editing. The other thing too that we need to note about these two displays is the coating on the panel itself. That is where the SW321C shines, because it's not just only a matte coating, it's actually an anti-reflective coating. And if I show to you side by side here, the picture that I'm viewing on this display, it looks as if I'm seeing this on a matte sheet of paper rather than a backlit display. Where if you look at this one, you can still see that the picture looks as if it's on display because the screen coating is a little bit different. What it really comes down to is that this is not a glossy screen coating by any means, but it's a lot more reflective than the SW321C. And that's the new technology that they have introduced with the SW321C. The SW321C here comes with a new feature that BenQ introduced called Uniformity version 2. And in Uniformity version 2, what BenQ have done is gone in, divide the display into multiple grids and calibrate those grids individually for brightness uniformity. That means that whatever color modes you run the calibration on for this display, you're always going to get great uniformity across the entire color mode. And that's what you get with the SW line. Something that you get with the PD line though is that for this display, BenQ have calibrated two different color modes, sRGB and Display P3, for greater uniformity. And I've actually done the testing on that, and those two color modes has the best uniformity, while all the other color modes is still good, but it's not quite as good as sRGB and Display P3. So that's something to think about. If you want to have greatest uniformity across all the color modes, or in the color mode you want to be calibrating it on, or in the color mode that you want to use in this case, you may want to consider SW line display because it has the better uniformity throughout. Now let's focus on the SW321C. Traditionally, the SW line has been marketed towards pro photographers. However, with this model, BenQ have also added video as another group of creative professionals that they're targeting as well. This display added another format to the standard, and they have added HLG, high log gamma, to the HDR capability of this display. This is something very different in the PD line, but the SW does. So this is why SW is going to be the flagship display for photography and also video. So there are a few more text specifications here that I want to share with you. One of them being the max brightness. The PD3220U can show up to 300 nits or 300 candela in terms of brightness, and the SW321C, this one can show up to 250 nits or 250 candela of brightness. Now the thing here is this, there are many people who've actually asked me already, is this going to be an issue? And for design work, for photography work, this won't be an issue at all. If you are filming in HDR though, this is part of the reason why BenQ have adopted the technology of HDR10 and HLG to help with the high dynamic range encoding. Another thing that I want to mention based on the size of the display is the pixel pitch. So what we have here with the PD3220U is a pixel pitch of about 140 pixels per inch. Because it is a 31.5 inch display, so the pixels are a little bit closer to each other, while this one being a 232 inch, the pixel pitch is a little bit further apart and is 137 pixels per inch. Both of these panels are guaranteed with amazing delta E value. With the SW line, always, BenQ will guarantee that you're going to get a delta E value of less than 2, and the PD line, you're going to get a delta E value of less than 3 for these panels. And in my calibration, I have tested that. The average delta E has always been below that number. Now let's talk software. I mentioned earlier that with the SW line, it comes with a software called Palette Master Element. In this case, you would use Palette Master Element along with a color measuring device to run a calibration on this display. And the reason why you want to use Palette Master Element is so that that software can talk with the computer or the lookup table that's directly built in to these display. This is a really stark contrast to the PD line, as I mentioned before, is that there is no software for calibration here. You would have to use either a third-party software or the software that comes with the measurement device manufacturer. But what this display comes with is an entirely different set of software, and it's called Display Pilot. And what Display Pilot does is when you install it on your machine, it allows you to have an interface, this software interface to control so many aspects of the screen. You can change the color space on this display or the color mode dynamically. You can set the input mode to different input modes dynamically. You can do so many things. And in fact, when you have Display Pilot installed on the computer, for instance, if I go in and rotate the display into a vertical orientation, not only are the menus and everything going to rotate, but it's also automatically going to tell the operating system to do a display rotation, so I don't have to go in and change the setting or rotate the display manually in a setting. And that's a level of integration between software and firmware of the display that is actually unseen. I'm really impressed with that software. With Display Pilot, you can also draw grids on the screen so you can measure the distance between spaces, and it also has this utility where you can go in and you can actually snap an app to a certain portion of the screen, which makes it really useful for a 4K screen. One more thing that I want to mention here too is that with the PD3220U, you can actually set it so that it uses 4 individual input sources in the display. So that means I can have 4 input sources showing all at one given time. That means it will maximize all the input source from all the ports that you have on the back. This is something very different in the SW line, where you can really do at a maximum 2 input modes. And when you're doing that, you're really using a mode in here called Gamut Dual, which both of these have. So Gamut Dual is a mode that BenQ have introduced that allows you to view 2 color space side by side. In the SW line and also the PD line, you can do Gamut Dual in a few different ways. So for instance, you can do it as a picture-in-picture, so there'll be a frame here that pops up, you can change the size of it, or you can do it as a picture-by-picture. Essentially, it will shrink the screen down so that you will see 2 of the same sources side by side or 2 of the different sources side by side in different color mode. But with this one is a split screen. So you can actually have one half of the screen showing one color mode and the other half showing another color mode, and you're viewing the exact same picture this way. This is something that is really unique to the PD line and is something that the SW does not have. So if that is important for you, or if your line of work, for instance, if you're doing CAD/CAM work and you need that feature, this will be the display for you. Lastly, let's talk about the color modes between these two displays. All the color modes that we come to expect, sRGB, Adobe RGB, Display P3 DCI-P3, Rec 709, and a few other color modes are all built into these panels. The difference is that with the SW line, you also get an advanced black and white color modes, which turns the entire screen to black and white. This is really helpful for photo editing when you want to quickly proof your work in black and white. And with this one, BenQ have also introduced a new color mode called Paper Color Sync. What Paper Color Sync does is that it's very similar to doing a soft proofing but on a hardware calibration slot. And what it does is that it actually changes your screen white point to D50, so you can dynamically change between D65 for editing and D50 for print proofing. So if you're doing any printing in-house, this is going to be a really great display for that. With the PD line, there are a few color modes that this is where these two varies. So with the PD line, what you also get, as I mentioned earlier, is the CAD-CAM mode. With CAD-CAM mode, it's designed to enhance lines and 3D drawings and so forth, so you can see that really easy. It also has animation modes for animators, that if you're animating with dark shadow areas, it has 10 different level of brightness that you can change your screen to, so you can see different dark shadow areas. It also has a low blue light mode, so that if you're reading something or you're browsing the web, you can actually take the blue light out, which helps a lot. And it also has a dark room mode that dims the screen down a little bit in case you don't want to edit in a super bright screen environment. So these are the features and differences between these two lines of BenQ Pro display. I hope that you find this video helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in a comment below. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit on the notification bell so you'll be updated when I upload really cool contents like this. And until next time, ArtIsRight.